So it's 43 degrees centigrade in Burgundy today, and when I went down to the cellar, I thought, what to open but a wine from another heatwave vintage, and I just in fact finished an article about the 1947 vintage, which is going to come out a little later this year in the Wine Advocate. So I opened 1947 La Conseillante, and 1947 Pomerol is very sort of seminal wines in the lives of a lot of wine consumers of a certain generation, and they're not wines that we see very much or drink very much these days. Not that many bottles were made, and the time has passed, a lot of water under the bridge, and so they're quite rare. But it's very interesting. It was a very extreme vintage, and I've just been looking through the Tessé Lorton book of the which recorded the Bordeaux weather conditions month by month. Already 39 degrees centigrade on the 26th, 27th of July, 28 degrees in June, 30 degrees in April. So very extreme temperatures going up to 37.9, at least recorded here in the Medoc in 19th of August. So not quite as hot as this year, but I think comparable, especially in the context of the time in terms of its extremes. What did it deliver in terms of the wines? I mean, I think wines are extremely characterful, extremely distinctive, marked by the vintage. It was challenging because the fruit was hot. People didn't have much in the way of temperature controls. There's a lot of stories about people dumping ice into the fermentation vats. The bigger the fermentation vat, the more heat it accumulates during fermentation. And so you more likely you are to have problems of stuck fermentation, and then you get, if the alcoholic fermentation stops, you have a sweet, warm must that's very susceptible to microbial spoilage of various sorts. Often that means bacteria that will make acetic acid or volatile acidity, acetates also in the wines. So there's some of these wines have these sort of high-toned, slightly volatile noses. They also sometimes have a little bit of residual sweetness from unfermented sugar. But when they're great, they're fantastic. And, in fact, looking at the lab analysis of these wines today, they're not quite as extreme as they seem. Most of the top wines of the Medoc that I've seen analysed about 12.5, which was high for the time, alcohol. And even the 47 Cheval Blanc, one of the iconic wines of the vintage, the iconic wine of the vintage, is only 14.5. That was very high for the time indeed, but today that's kind of the starting point for alcohol levels in a sunny vintage in the right bank. So, everything has to be put in its context. It's really interesting tasting these wines today because, this Conseillante, it's a fantastic bottle, honestly, and I didn't expect it to be so good. Has a high-tone nose. There is some volatile acidity today, more than contemporary enologists would tolerate, probably. Yet it's immensely characterful. There's a sweetness of fruit without it being cloying. If the distinction in wine is between wines that are fruit beverages and wines that are beverages made from fruit, it's the latter. It's not jammy, it's not simple. To me, it's more interesting today than bottles of 47 Cheval Blanc because those are beginning to get a little bit sort of caramel flavored and a little bit, they're sort of tiring, and it's hard. I think it's hard for wine consumers of my generation tasting that wine today to really see without using quite a lot of imagination why everyone got so excited about it 30, 40, 50 years ago. Today, looking at other wines, people always were so excited about the wines of the right back, but I think the wines of the right back are also more variable. They got a lot riper. The Merlot really accumulated a lot of sugar in there, and they're quite alcoholic. For me, the most exciting by far is Petrus, which is just one of those sort of mind-blowing wines. It's more of an elixir than a wine, but it is quite extraordinary. It really lives up to all of the things you hear about it. But after that, for me, I've had probably more pleasure with the wines of the Medoc. Mouton, Margaux made fabulous wines, and so did Estates de Montrose. Longo à Barton made a fabulous wine. So there's some great Medocs, and everyone's sort of chased after these iconic right bank wines, I think because of their power and sweetness at the time. So many wine regions in the world can do that today, including Bordeaux most years. So today I think making a sort of very powerful, rich, sweet wine distinguishes you a bit less, and one has the right to ask for more. But this is a fabulous bottle. You can see the color of it from Le Conseillante on the border with Saint-Emilion, neighbouring Cheval Blanc on that sort of the edge of the plateau of Saint-Emilion and gravelly soils, Cabernet Franc Merlot, and a beautifully elegant style of wine, which is not eclipsed by the vintage. So it's a great vintage of Conseillante for me. I'm amazed, and even in 42-degree heat, keeping the wine in the refrigerator every 15 minutes to keep it from getting too hot, it's a fantastic bottle.